start.
You wanted the best. You got the best.
Spins Vinyl, the vinyl leader.
It's kind of embarrassing. I have this like whole Kiss lead in to a jazz show. It's like I gotta figure that out. Oh man,
more intense than a Bill Evans solo. How about that?
Super intense. Guys, what's up? Welcome back to the Spins Vinyl channel. Of course, today you see him. He's right there. WCB. Chris is here from the Jazz Vinyl Collector channel. Chris, how's it going, man?
I'm doing fantastic.
What's the best way? This isn't part of the interview, but like I always feel like when I'm trying to describe your channel, is it? I want to say WCB. Is it jazz? Did I get that right? Is it the Jazz Vinyl channel?
It's horrible branding, is what it is. That's the problem, because it's lack of consistency with what I am on Instagram versus what I am on YouTube. But I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like I kind of want to change my Instagram one, but that seems like more problematic because I've been on Instagram for like 12 years. But it's on YouTube, it's WCB Jazz Vinyl, but I completely get it. It sucks.
Well, no, it doesn't suck. I shouldn't have even brought it up. I just want to make sure I get it right. No, I think it's cool. And when we talked about it before and you told me how you came up with WCB and all that stuff, I think no, it's cool. I shouldn't have opened that can of worms.
No, these are things that these are things that are top of mind to me every day of my life. So it's all good.
Glad to be a little bit of feedback inadvertently. So yeah, guys, today we're gonna have some fun, man. We're gonna talk jazz. This is really just kind of the first time that Chris are kind of face to face here. But dude, last time you were on, I had such a good time. I was just looking for any reason to get you back here because I feel like we're kind of kindred spirits in a lot of ways. And so we'll ask Chris some questions, and also, you know, the reason to do this live, guys, is so that you guys can like tee up some stuff. Think about what you want to ask, and we'll put we'll kind of put some pressure on Chris maybe to answer some questions that you guys want to know, and that could be fun. So think about that while we're going along here. But this is just going to be a fun, loose conversation. We're going to talk about jazz. We might get into like some of the reissue series that are going on, including a new one which is coming, which some people might not know about. And then we're gonna do another like a augmented version of the fantasy draft, the jazz fantasy draft. And this was based on some feedback that we got from you guys. So we'll see if hopefully you guys will have a good time with this as well. And totally judge us for why did we pick that guy for that band? What are we thinking? That could be fun too. So first of all, I just saw on Instagram that you were on the WKCR station. What's that about?
Yeah. So WKCR is 89.9 FM, located out of Columbia University in Harlem. So I was invited. All right. So some context. There's two founders of JMI Recordings, which is a fantastic record label, brand new music of both up and coming artists as well as some, folks who have been around for a long time, right? So they put out like David Murray, and they put out one recently with Questlove on it, which is an unusual choice for a jazz title, but it worked really well. Anyway, those two guys have a monthly radio station, or like broadcast, channel or whatever that they do on WKCR, and it's called Labeled. And this is like, it's super fun for any of us who are vinyl collectors, or at least if you're a vinyl collector who thinks in terms of labels, which I do, right? I think of Blue Note, Riverside, some of the legacy that these labels leave behind. So what they do every month is they pick a label and they just spin for 5 hours, only needle drops from records on that label. I say for 5 hours, it's like 3.5 of music and 1.5 of talking. Sometimes it's just those two guys, and sometimes they have a guest. So about 2 years ago, I came on and did Riverside, carted out like 40 records from my collection out to New York, which was a huge pain because I landed in JFK and then had to go all the way to Harlem. And then this time I thought it was smarter. So first of all, it was focused on Bethlehem. I had a ticket to go out to LGA, but when your spouse is a Delta employee, you never know where you're going to fly into. We ended up in jail.
Yeah.
So it was another experience of hauling records all over the city.
Yikes. Well, that's cool though. I mean, that's fun. I mean, did you appear on the show at all, or was it you brought your records and you spun records, or did you were you involved in some of the conversation on there?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I don't want to say I led the conversation because they were definitely interrogating me, but I'm pretty well read up on Bethlehem. I've been collecting that label for a long time. It's one of those older labels though that sort of bridged the shellac disc into the 10-inch and 12-inch era. So their heyday was like 54 to 56, and then they kind of like sputtered around for a few more years before they were sold. So it's a pretty it's a pretty concise timeline in terms of the spectrum of like how jazz music evolved, and but it's fascinating. It's all great stuff, and
Yeah.
it's a fun label to collect because the engineers were on point. It was like Tom Dowd and out of Atlantic, and Rudy Van Gelder, and some others. The artwork is fantastic, mostly done by Bert Goldblatt, who is the photographer around this room on the wall. And like the artists, I mean, the artists are fantastic. They did kind of lean a little bit more into the West Coast, especially early on, but they ended up having like Booker Irvin, Booker Little, Mal Waldron, Jackie McLean, Dexter Gordon. So it's not just a sleepy label, even though that's probably a little bit of its reputation.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I would say it's a deeper cut probably for most people, right? I mean, people are going to know obviously Blue Note, the big one, Prestige, New Jazz, Impulse. And then it starts to, for the average probably collector, it's going to start to get a little vague. So that's really cool. That's really cool, man.
Yeah.
Is that what? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the problem with that, the reason why is not like the collector's fault. The big problem is that no one is reissuing the stuff.
Right.
You've got New Land Records out of the UK that put out Howard McGee's Dusty Blue, and that was indeed a record that I brought out there. I brought out some ones that I probably shouldn't have when you consider what I had to pack in my suitcase and like take out there. I was like putting stuff onto the platter at the station, and I was like, this might be $1,000 record. I don't know if I should have brought this out here. But yeah, Dusty Blue, and then they put out one of the Mingus titles. It's called like a Jazz Symposium, something or other. I think it's a long name. But by and large, the stuff has not been reissued, and in fact, only a quarter of the catalog, I believe, has ever had a reissue.
Wow.
So
wow.
It's pretty cool, even just from the standpoint of if you find a Bethlehem record in a store, there's a good chance that it hasn't been reissued, and it's it has that kind of like one of a kind type of feel to it, like you're discovering something.
Yep. Man, you're bringing up a great topic. I could just go on this for hours. I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know if this is going to put you on the spot, or make me look ignorant, but I'm always curious about, and if you know anything about this, what is it that why do artists jump labels? Like, it's interesting that you might have a guy that's, an Impulse person that suddenly does one Blue Note, or they might go and do you know anything about that history?
I can speak like I seem like I know what I'm talking about, but inevitably
that's good enough.
I do that for a living. So, I mean, here's the thing, like certain labels would lock up artists into contracts. And so you'd sign call it a 2-year deal, or maybe it wouldn't be time bound. It would be, say, time and number of sides or number of albums. So for example, I know we were just talking about Bethlehem, and their very first artist they ever signed was Chris Connor, and they signed her for a 2-year deal. And there was a big controversy towards the end because she had not fulfilled her contract, and yet she had already left and signed with Atlantic. So, I mean, back then, I think somebody's ability to hold somebody else accountable to like being in a contract was limited to like, do you actually want to go to litigation? Do you want to kind of pursue that? Do you want to shame them in the media? And that is inevitably what happened with Chris Connor. She was a little bit shamed in the media. But I mean, to answer your question, yes, a lot of these folks, if you were a leader, you could get signed in a multi-album or multi-year contract. A lot of the musicians that supported them, didn't necessarily come with, right? So you could kind of play around. Like, I don't know that Art Taylor was ever under contract. Well, actually, he kind of was the Prestige session drummer. So maybe that's like a bad example, but there's a variety of these folks that played on multiple labels. And Bethlehem didn't tend to sign too many artists, especially later in their life. And so, if you look at the back of a lot of records, you'll see so and so on loan from Blue Note or on loan from Prestige. That's an
Right.
example when they are in a contract, but it apparently doesn't prevent them from being able to take one of these
That's the
musicians
thing.
over. Maybe there's some trading. Maybe they're like, hey,
Right.
you want Miles Davis on something else, then we want somebody. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's like, with Miles and Columbia, most people are going to think of him as a Prestige, then Columbia. Like it's very clear, including like some Blue Note sessions that he did early on, that they turned into like a volume 1, volume 2. Then he does the Prestige thing for a while. Then he goes to Columbia. But it's like, what's weird is like when somebody does, and even, where they're a leader, even, well, Dolphy, let's say Eric Dolphy, who was going to be mostly new jazz Prestige. And then his greatest album, in my opinion, is a Blue Note. And it's like, how does that happen? It just, I don't know. I'm always curious about, how those things come about. And it's hard to find information about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't think people really bothered preserving it. It didn't seem important at the time. You almost have to talk to artists, like,
Right.
watch some interviews with Ron Carter or Herbie or, some of these folks who reminisce on what it was like to work for some of these labels. And I mean, there is a little bit of that, but by and large, interviewers haven't bothered asking some of those questions that maybe only us record nerds think about later on,
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and it becomes almost more interesting because the information is so elusive, and it's like, I gotta know.
Yeah.
Um, well, so one thing I do want to ask you about, and I'm sorry if this is something that you get asked all the time, but from what I know, it seems like you have an extensive OG jazz collection. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say that's fair to say. I was a first pressing fundamentalist for probably the first 3/4 of my time collecting.
Wow, gotcha. It's the kind of thing that comes up a lot with, people I talk to and stuff, and people that are interested in jazz, and it's the topic is almost always, oh man, if I could just afford an OG, or and then or it gets it's if I want to spend $300 on an OG and have it be a G plus, for example, I'd rather just buy the reissue. So those kinds of conversations are always swirling around the jazz conversation. You're someone that, though, has like, don't you pretty much have the Blue Note catalog on lockdown? And tell us a little bit about that. Like, what labels do you have? Are you a completionist? Do you have like a minimum grade you have to have? I just love to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll answer it in a few ways. I mean, first of all, my style has evolved out of sort of necessity, I would say, or opportunity, depending on how you look at it. So when I started, I didn't have a perspective other than that. I felt it important to buy original pressings. And I don't know exactly why that was, but we're talking like 2011, 2012. We had some reissue programs, right? Like Music Matters. We did not have, Tone Poet or Blue Note Classic Series, that kind of thing. And I mean,
at that time, Music Matters was fairly, when those came out, they weren't that expensive, right? They're not as pricey as they are now. Is that right?
that's right. I mean, they still retailed for more than a Tone Poet today, though.
Like
Which,
$50 or something,
yeah,
or
something like $50. Yeah. So that was, when did Music Matters press the last of their stuff? That might have been, it was like 2010, 2012. So probably a similar kind of time period to where when I started collecting, I wasn't really paying attention to Music Matters. I remember seeing them often in the stores, and some of them already were $100, $200 because they were out of print.
Hmm.
So, I steered clear of that. I was more interested in finding the cheap stuff. And in fact, I was going after, in order to have it, I was going after any condition.
Okay.
I would buy a G plus or a VG minus, and I would play it too.
Mhm.
I didn't care as much, but I also didn't have as nice of as nice of a setup, or as a what would the word be, like, as transparent of a setup, or it wouldn't necessarily bring it out as much. I think
Right. You weren't
it's
losing much because the system wasn't there to like bring everything that's in those grooves out.
Yeah, that's right. So I early on I was collecting original. I did make an effort to try to find out what it meant to be an original. because other people in the community were doing the same. So I was on Instagram in 2012 with an account, talking with collectors already. I started posting, and we kind of found each other. And at that time, I'm sure that there was, in the dozens, not in the thousands that we that we have today.
Right.
But there was at least in the dozens, and so that was enough people to kind of learn from and chat and that kind of thing. And I'm on my second Instagram account now, but still kind of doing the same thing. Initially I was shut down because they accused me of impersonating a celebrity, because my name is Chris Brown. So they purged everybody whose name was Chris Brown, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
Come on.
But anyway, I never got it back. But back to your question, originals. Over time, I got pickier, both in terms of knowing exactly what to look for, as well as having a little bit more money to spend. And as I upgraded my equipment, I also realized that I didn't want to have any of those G plus and VG minus stuff anymore. And so I've been slowly pushing those out. And to the extent that I sell a lot on eBay these days, a lot of times it's getting rid of that lesser copy because I've finally been able to upgrade.
Yeah.
So if I think about the labels though, because I got enamored by the history, and I went deep into like each of these labels and learning about all the releases and following the records on Discogs, adding them to my want list or watch list. At this point, in terms of the Blue Note catalog, I have every title in its original form except for about maybe 10 titles. Wow. And those are going to be the obvious ones, right? So it's True Blue, it's Yuda Hip, it's Mobley 1568, the one with like the big saxophone on it.
Right.
Because even in 2012, 2013, when I was trying to pick this stuff up, those were already over $1,000. Yeah. And I had a strict rule early on when I was collecting of $50 per title. That was the most that I was going to spend. And I could pick up, a lot of the Blue Note catalog for under that, or I would wait until I got it. Like I found a copy of Horace Parlan's Us 3 for $40. And it's a great copy.
Nice.
And that's now probably a $2,000 record or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's not because it was valued that much. It's because it was a deal. They advertised it as a Music Matters one, and I just happened to realize that it was definitely not Music Matters, and so I scooped it up. So yes, I'm a little bit of a completist with Blue Note, also with Prestige, New Jazz. In terms of like, I don't know, early catalog, I'm a completist with Bethlehem. But everything else, I pick and choose. Savoy, I pick and choose. Riverside, Impulse. I mean, pretty much all of the major labels. Argo, MRC, and the super like unfortunate thing that I haven't yet like even attempted to tackle yet is my listening room right now is organized by label, and I really don't want to do that anymore.
Oh, really?
I just want to redo it all and have it be by artist or something like that. And it's just such a daunting task.
So you have it by label. Is it also by like catalog number, like chronological? So, or you have some other system?
Yeah. Here's my system. You ready for this?
Yeah.
So Blue Note and Prestige and New Jazz are by catalog number. Every other label is not in order at all.
Okay.
I can't even I can't even make excuses. I don't know why. It's impossible to find anything.
That's funny.
But I will say that the people that try to defend their poor decisions say something like this. What it allows you to do is rediscover music that you weren't looking for.
Totally. Just grab the one off the top, whatever it is. You never know. That's funny.
Yeah.
I mean, you see a lot of people that have, I see it a lot with jazz, but I don't know. Maybe it crosses over to other genres too, where people will keep all their impulses together because they've got the nice orange spines on them, or they'll keep all their blue notes together. It just maybe because it just looks cool that way on your shelf. It's like I'm pretty particular in terms of like genre, artist. And then, I used to try to keep them like some music. I'll try to keep it chronological to like my 80s. But jazz is like harder because I don't have it in my mind. Like if I try to put every Dolphy record in order or whatever Horace.
Yeah.
So I don't know when those things, you know what I mean? So they just go in there. So
Yeah, and I think probably more complicated when you're multi-genre, because I totally get the idea of wanting to separate the genres, and I don't even have one cube. I talk about like IKEA cubes. I don't even have one cube of non-jazz. So, with it all being jazz, I I don't know. It should be alphabetical. Like, why do I have a separate section for Strata-East? I only have 30. I have like 28 or 30 of those, but it's a separate section. Like, why did I do that? Transition Records is a label of what, like 12? Those are in a separate. Doesn't make any sense.
I mean, there is a world where I can see that. That's like when, the reason why we created spreadsheets is so that we can sort things by, chronological day or title or by this or that. I can see that, like, if you want to do a video on Strata-East, it's easy, right? You don't have to try to guess where these things are. So I can see a context where it works, but I also, for listening, I can see that being very difficult.
Yeah. And what it does is, like, to some degree, I almost feel like the way that I've organized things almost disrespects the music, because it's like, what should I care about? Being a completist with a label? Like, the labels, who are, by the way, the only ones who ever made money with this music, like, it just feels a little, I don't like it. Like, that's why I want to get out of this mode, and I want to be able to find stuff, because, like, when I go and do a DJ thing, it'll take me like a half hour to find that one Benny Maupin record that I feel like I want to spend,
I gotcha. Yeah, you would almost need to do a thing where you have everything in a spreadsheet with like you'd have to number, this is just getting way too much into the weeds, but if you numbered each shelf like A1, A2, A3, B1, 2B, and then you could just say, okay, my Benny Maupin is A2, and then you go look on a spreadsheet and come back. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, I got way too deep on that. But no, I can see why you'd want to change it up. That's going to be, I don't know, that's going to be fun, right? You're probably going to find stuff that you're like, oh yeah, this is cool. I need to listen to this.
I'll shoot a video. I'll time lapse it and I'll put it up on YouTube. How about that?
Absolutely, please do that. That'd be so fun. That would be cool. So, gosh, I ask a question that's going to feel like it's taking a left turn here, but is there? And this is going to take it to YouTube, because I because you're a YouTuber and I know you do Instagram. You've been on Instagram for a long time, but is there something about the jazz narrative that you would like to see changed in a way? Because and this might go back to, it could be anything, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe the way people perceive jazz, maybe it's too difficult to get into, or maybe it's considered, grandpa music. Is there anything like that where it's like, if people just got it, maybe they would appreciate jazz more?
That's a tough one. Or it's both tough and I have to choose my words carefully.
Right.
I
like to torture people. When I talk to it's like I like to ask the hard question.
Yeah. So let me get out the hard part of the conversation. I'll get out of the way first, and that is that, to some degree, I think that the wrong people are talking about the music right now on YouTube.
Okay.
And I don't mean that we all shouldn't be able to. I think we should, because if you're passionate about it, you should be able to talk about what you're passionate about. But I feel like it's really hard to ignore that we are not the demographic of the people who made the music.
Right.
And is that our fault that there aren't, collectors out there who don't also want to talk about it? It isn't, but it feels a little strange. It feels like what it feels like is all of the people who are writing reviews about the music in the 50s, who also were not the demographic of the people making the music.
Right.
And so, I can't say that statement and then relieve myself of responsibility and step away and just be like, now I'm fine. It's just, I don't know. It feels obvious to me.
I feel it's kind of an elephant in the room, I think, sometimes. And part of the reason I like to ask questions like this, and I like to have conversations like this, I think they're important because, yes, it's like this elephant in the room that people just avoid. And like, to your point, right? Like, okay, a certain person is going to talk about jazz and this and that and all this stuff. And it's like, but we never really talk about, like, what you're saying, right? Is like, there's just the elephant in the room that people will ignore. and especially the history of jazz, which is a very contentious kind of, if that's the right word, history, and stuff like that, and the artists and their relationships to the world at large, let alone the jazz world and all that stuff. So we don't talk about it. So anyway, I just kind of want to jump in there because I like that you're kind of going there.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't want to make it seem like there's any special obligation. I think these days, like, people can lean in to the music and appreciate it simply for what comes out of the speakers. And I think that's great, because to some degree, if you're interested in jazz, you're supporting, hopefully at the end of the day, a label that continues to champion great music, or better yet, the estate or the family of an artist who maybe is still around and still collecting royalties, and maybe it'll get you into buying new music and supporting new artists, right? Who actually are able to make real money off of physical media that they sell, as opposed to the original items that, as they change hands in the used market, none of that's going back. And I think too that, like, I don't know. Again, it just depends on how much you want to lean in. Like, coming from somebody, me being somebody who studied the music, doesn't make me more, doesn't give me the right to tell anybody that what they like is wrong, or that they should listen to it in a certain way. But I do feel, because I know a bunch of musicians, that I want to try to do something that's a little bit closer to the community, rather than just, talk about it on YouTube and post the music. And here's the thing, like, the easiest thing to do is simply to support new artists, or reissues of, like, I know you want to talk about potentially Strata-East, the fact that, Tolliver is involved in that, and has the opportunity to kind of, further help these musicians and their estates, right, by putting the music back out there. So anyway, I don't know. This is like a long-winded way of me being, trying to be sensitive about a sensitive topic.
Right.
But I don't know necessarily that we can solve for it here.
I hear you.
The maybe more broadly than that, I think the perception of this music is that you do have to know theory, and I don't think that that's accurate. Or that you can't be knowledgeable unless you've heard 90% of everything that's ever been put out, which I think is complete BS. Like, I just think that people should be able to be moved by whatever music it is, and leave it at that, and like one piece of music because they feel that way, dislike another piece of music because they don't, even if the piece of music they don't like is an artist who's unpopular to dislike. Like, it's possible to not really enjoy John Coltrane's music. Like, that's okay. And yet sometimes it feels like it's not okay if you're talking to anybody else in this community. And so I don't like the exclusive nature of the community. And I have to say, like, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate what the Jazz Buns are doing, and some other channels. And I don't want to make anybody feel like they're left out by me not saying them. But I do think that there is a little bit of an exclusive or exclusionary nature to this hobby. That's like, you have to do it this way. And unless you do it this way, then, like, this is the only way you're doing it right. Like, everything else is wrong. Like, you shouldn't be going after that pressing. You shouldn't like that artist.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons why I have to be real. Like, I don't do a lot of this stuff. Like, I hang out with you a few times, right? And I appear sometimes in the Jazz Bums stuff, but I tend to I tend to stick to my own channel rather than kind of going out too frequently, because I'm trying to avoid some of the drama.
I hear you 1000%. And believe me, I spent like a year just confined to my own space and try to have my own narrative. And it really was, I mean, an effort to let people know that, look, this is an inclusive community here, whatever, spins vinyl, if you come here, it's like, I get people that listen only to CDs, and they want to talk about music. You are welcome here. Like, that, totally respect that. I get people that ask me about jazz, and they're like, look, I like the Charlie Brown soundtrack. How can you help me? Absolutely. and stuff. And so it's like,
I love the Charlie Brown soundtrack.
yeah, exactly. Right. Or Take Five, it's like, what else can you introduce? What else can you, because they just have a hard time with listening to, more challenging jazz. It's totally fine. So yeah, I think you have to find how to include people and not alienate people, no matter what they like, their tastes are, how they come into it and stuff. And yeah, I've always really frowned on that. I don't even like to talk about it. I just try to be that, be about it as opposed to talk about it, and just let people know, like, hey, whatever your tastes are, like, it's all good. Like, and a lot of people do feel like they have to like whisper it, because they're afraid that people are going to attack them.
Yeah, well, the best way to combat it is to simply put out, relatively positive content. Like, don't get me wrong, like I'm plenty of snarkiness in my delivery and style. I know it, but I also try not to be mean.
Right.
Or if I make a mistake, then and it's quickly pointed out by somebody like Joe Harley, who has a tendency to correct me in the comments, which I think is fantastic. I'm not too proud, right?
Right. I mean, well, that's part of it too, is you can't be afraid to say something that's not 100% correct, or that's gonna, like, you just have to do your thing. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're just gonna be paralyzed, because no matter what you say, someone is not going to be happy. So
Yeah, that's right. We had people calling into the radio station over on Sunday, kind of subtle corrections, all positive, but people are
right.
like, "Oh, don't you actually know that it was this year and not this year?" And I'm like, "Did you just look that up, or like what?"
Yeah. It's funny. I did a video. All I did was post a short of talking about the Star Wars soundtrack, which I grew up. I saw Star Wars as a little kid. I got the soundtrack and all this stuff. And I was talking about how there was a show on, if you know, the Muppet Show with Kermit and Miss Piggy and all that. I used to watch that as a kid back in the day. They had this segment on there called Pigs in Space. And it was like a spoof on Star Trek and Lost in Space and that. So I mentioned that, hey, when I went into the theater, I yelled out "Pigs in Space." Someone messages, well, Pigs in Space came out on this day and blah, blah. And I was like, wait, what? How do you know that? First of all, and so anyway, so then it puts me in the awkward position. Now I have to do all this Pigs in Space research to see if I actually remember what actually happened. Anyway, we worked it out, but it was just funny, That's getting deep in the weeds right there. Some pigs in space knowledge.
I forgot that existed until you mentioned it, but now I did recall.
Yeah. That's funny. Is there a video, like if I'm going to send somebody to go check out WCB, is there a video that you feel like kind of encapsulates your vision, or that you're proud of? Be like, this is the first place I want people to come. If you could make that choice and decide the first video people land on, do you have a video like that? What would it be?
It's, what it is. It's the stuff that gets the least likes, and it's not out of retribution. It's because the stuff that gets the least likes tends to be the stuff that I enjoyed making the most.
Maybe it's more personal, or
yeah. So to answer your question, I really love my video that's called "Rare Blue Notes in Bad Condition." So it's like original pressing 1500 series Blue Notes that are just like scratched to hell. Because I mentioned early on, my style was to get them in almost in any condition, and then I try to upgrade them over time. Well, guess what? Some of those 1500 series ones that I haven't been able to replace are those rare, like Hank Mobley kind of stuff. So I made a whole video with like close-ups of like all the scratches, and I'm like, here's the record. You can see it's water damaged. Like, I just really dug making that one. And then the other one is so I made a video about Blue Note 45s, because most people don't really care about Blue Note 45s. They don't collect them. And to be fair, like, it's hard to find jazz 45s at record stores because no one has a jazz 45 section anymore.
right.
So I've amassed something like 120 of them. And what I wanted to highlight was not just, hey, look at my 120, but there's actually a good, I'll call it 12 or 15, maybe more, that were never put out on 12-inch. So they were issued in 45, and they never put it out. So some of those were later packaged and put out by Music Matters or Tone Poet, right, as like a, as a unissued, record. but they kind of some of these technically were issued, but only on 45. And if you collect those 45s, you can like stitch together entire albums by like Benny Green and Sonny Clark and Ike Quebec, and it gives you something different, like to go after. You can have an etched RVG, because they did that for that too. Etched RVG 45 of a Sonny Clark single that was never put out on vinyl, like on on LP. It's kind of cool.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Actually, I was going to ask you about that because I know, like, and I skipped by it, but I know you're somewhat completionist, especially when it comes to like Blue Note and some of the bigger labels. 10-inch, same deal. I mean, do you have a lot of those early like prestige 10 inches and stuff?
Yeah, not as much of a completionist, although I will say that I've made a pretty good go of Blue Note.
Okay.
So I am missing some, but I've made a pretty good go of it. I do have all the Bethlehem 10-inch ones, although that represented such a significant portion of their early life. But otherwise, I selectively buy 10-inch. So, like somewhat opportunistically too, because more often than not, I'm not like on eBay seeking them out necessarily. It's more of a, if I see 10 inches at a record store, I know that no one is giving them any attention. And so I'll go in and see if there's anything worthwhile. And I'm frequently surprised, to the extent that record stores even keep them in stock, because there's a local store near me who I'm like, I asked him, I was like, do you have any 10-inch records? And he's like, I just throw them out. And I'm like,
whoa, what?
No.
I mean, that's shocking. I mean, geez.
Yeah, he said nobody buys them. One time I went in and he's like, I found a 10-inch for you. And I was like, what is it? And he brings out, it's Dexter Gordon and Wardell Gray's The Chase, or The Chase Is On. I forget what it's called, but it's I think it's The Chase. It's a 10-inch. And he's like, here, you can just have it. And it's on Discogs, it's like a $50 record. He didn't bother to look it up, but
wow.
So I personally think, like, don't get me wrong, like 10-inch is more likely to be played by bad equipment, more likely to have, a tone arm that's, improperly weighted, and a cartridge that maybe is a relic from the 16 or from the 78 RPM era, and be scratched and mishandled, and it didn't come with inner sleeves, and like the condition is just going to be a problem. But if you find one that's that's in decent shape, it sounds great,
Yeah. I think they're fun. And what's funny is I've kind of made this comment before, where sometimes you just want, sometimes you just have like 20 minutes or 30 minutes. You want to just listen to it, and having a 10-inch is kind of fun in that sense. Sorry, man, I'm still trying to get over this cough. And they're cool. I like that it's a smaller form factor, and sometimes the art is even a little bit different. And yeah, I just think they're cool. I think they're fun. I kind of want to get more. I happened to buy like a bunch of them on like an eBay lot because they had enough that I thought was really cool. And so sometimes you can get them like that and get some cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of our favorite labels were putting out stuff on 10-inch, right? I mean, New Jazz is doing it, even though they then kind of shuttered that label and then brought it back later. But certainly Prestige, Blue Note, Contemporary, Atlantic, not as much really, especially not in jazz, but and not really Riverside. But like MRC, I mean, if you're going to get any of those early Clifford Browns, it's going to be on MRC 10-inch.
Do you have like all the fantasy? I love the fantasies, right? That have like the translucent colored wax. Do you have all those? Those are cool.
I only have a couple. The problem with those is they're just so hard to gauge the condition of. So you see them in a store and you're like, I can't really, I don't know, the blue and the red. Or if you buy a Nocturne, which is a very short label in terms of its life, they put it out on like purple, which is kind of cool. Like even just from like the standpoint of, or they call it indigo, I forget, but there's some fun ones out there. Or you'd be surprised at how early they were doing like the marble, almost like splatter pattern. You can find that on 10-inch as well.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was surprised just to find some fantasy with those translucent. I have like a green one and a red one, and they're so beautiful. But yeah, I didn't know they did splatter patterns. That's cool.
Yeah. I'm seeing Wyoming Dave join, and he's talking about a Herb Geller 10-inch. That Herb Geller has some really good stuff on MRC. I'm trying to think. I want to say that one of them might have had Art Pepper on it, but don't hold me to that. I'm trying to remember which session it is that I have in mind. But he played with some great artists, in addition to the fact that obviously Herb Geller was great too.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out everybody in chat. Thanks, guys. Eric Wong is in the house. Roberto Carlos in the house. Shane Vinyl Records. Groove Seeker, of course. Thanks for being here. Vinyl and Kicks. Good to have you guys all here, man. The Freight, thank you. The Freight, always with nice things to say. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, Final and Kicks, I see that comment about you know, context of the music, and like, you know, that's one of those things that I think is, you know, the longer I think the longer that that many of us are interested in the music, the more curious we become, right? Because you get kind of limited to maybe the liner notes. But you know, a product of both studying jazz music in college, where I was reading biographies, but also just my own curiosity these days. I pick up a lot of biographies, a lot of history books, and then, you know, I've highlighted in one of my videos in the past that I have all these sort of downbeat volumes, you know,
Yeah,
sort of
those are
out
fun.
volumes, and I'm reading them like I'm reading them every night. Like, not I'm not talking like cover to cover, but I'll read a few pages every night before I go to bed, just as like a kind of wind down type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I love reading about the context. And I know that not everybody necessarily leans into that extent, and they kind of just leave it to the music. But I agree.
It's amazing how much new information you can get from both liner notes and reading those magazines. Not everything is on the internet. It seems like it should be, but a lot of that stuff's not. It's still kind of lost in those pages of those old magazines. I love having them too, and I'm always learning new stuff. So yeah, that's a really fun way to kind of pick up some I don't know, some just kind of like hidden facts that you wouldn't be able to otherwise find.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, Shane Vinyl says it's like kids listening to rock that were not alive when it first came out. Most of the new jazz fans were not alive during the 50s and 60s while jazz was popular. It's funny because yeah, I've always thought of when I was young listening to jazz and stuff, you know, because I mean, I grew up, my dad had a very eclectic taste. He was almost to, I don't want to say he was already kind of aging out of that. I mean, he got to see Miles, he got to see Dizzy and stuff like that. But you know, by that point, that he was going to the Fillmore in San Francisco and watching rock band, you know, this late 60s rock bands and stuff. So most of what we consider to be like the hard bop era and stuff like that, or what cool jazz already happened even then. And then for me to kind of get into it, and people would look at me like I was crazy. Like, why are you listening to that stuff? And the fact that here we are now in 2025 and we still talk about it, a lot of people still listen and collect. And, you know, so about the time you start asking yourself, like, how is this stuff really going to survive? There's no way a young person's going to like be into this and start. But man, it happened to us, right? So it's kind of, you know, who knows? It could be that this stuff is just evergreen and there's just always going to be somebody there for it. I hope so. I mean, it's cool. It's historic. It's fun music. It's
yeah.
fun to follow too, right? I mean, it's just fun kind of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together when you start really getting into it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and you know, who knows? Maybe we're in a sort of a renaissance or resurgence for the moment, and things will cool off. But I just you know, if is I think as long as there's new music that's being created that's so directly inspired by so much of this earlier music, I think that it's gonna kind of be here to stay. Like if that movement kind of peters out and no one's doing it anymore, then it's just a bunch of people collecting things maybe. And
Right.
that's not as cool. But yeah, no, I think I don't think the hobby's going anywhere. I don't think the passion for, you know, the music is going anywhere, at least as far as I can tell. And it's easy to see why, right? You get all these whether it's reissues or originals, and getting to hear them on modern equipment and how amazing it sounds. Like that's that kind of like, it's going to transcend generations, I think.
Well, so I was going to ask you about that. Is in terms of like, you know, jazz, at least especially in recent years, you know, with the creation of the Tone Poet series and the classic series, which kind of formed out of various Blue Note, a more affordable series. And now we have, you know, it's called the classic series now. And then we had Music Matters for a while, and Prestige. Now OJC is back at it and stuff like that. What are your thoughts about I don't know, just to simplify this question, maybe it's how does that stuff compare in your mind? It's being someone that has a lot of originals to that stuff, and take it any way you want, like audio wise or even like just presentation wise.
Yeah, it's it's tough.
No, I'm asking you to like alien. I'm sorry if I keep asking you questions that's going to alienate a segment of the people.
No, it's all good. So here's the thing. Like, let's think about set vinyl aside for just a moment, and let's talk about think about like furniture. Okay, like antique furniture versus new furniture, and let's even say high quality new furniture. The fact that you have something that's antique, that has a story behind it, that maybe it has some scratches in it, maybe it's not as good as, or it doesn't serve the complete purpose as the new table. And maybe this is like a bad way to put it, because I understand that modern furniture is made from like particle board and all this kind of BS. But like there's always this desire for the older thing, even if we acknowledge it's not as useful. Like a car maybe is a better example. In fact, I have a 1954 Chevy Bel Air. That gives you any idea of what's wrong inside my mind. And it's a rat rod too. Like the thing barely runs. But like there's an appreciation for these old things, and there's a beauty in them, even if they are not as useful as the modern equivalent. And like, listen, with records, I'm not going to be the person to tell you that the older ones sound better. And I also don't even really think that there's an intangible, some people talk about this kind of intangible quality of mono, and that it's, I don't know, in your face or whatever people say about these things. I think that but at the same time, there's a subjective charm to these old things. And do I really enjoy listening to the old records? I absolutely love listening to the old records. But then at the same time, I love hearing what Tone Poet does with them, because I don't even want to say there's nothing objective in this hobby. That's one thing I've learned. So I will say subjectively, the Tone Poets sound better in almost every situation. I think there was like one example where I was complaining about a record, and then everybody jumped down my throat because they were like, "How could you?"
You heard it here, folks.
Yeah. So you know, I don't even remember the question. It was something.
Well, so is there a piece of, in terms of being connected to like you said, you have an older car, you said there's something charming about it. Is there something, for me, is there something that kind of just connects you to the history more? Like you're holding something that is the actual thing that was created, 50, 60 years ago. It smells different. The paper's yellow. I don't know. For me, it just feels like this is the artifact of the thing that I'm actually listening to. This is more connected to when it came out. And, maybe this is one that Eric Dolphy took off the press and said, yeah, that'll do. And like pass it on, like they were walking the earth when this came out. Is there a sense of that where it just feels special because it's more historic?
It does. It really does. And, I like, again, vinyl, cars, actually furniture to some degree. I like old things, and it is for that reason. It is because of the sort of the story that it brings. It is the scarcity. Let's be real. A lot of these records that we are after, there may only be, okay, I know for some dozens, but probably more likely, 500 to 1,000 that might still be in existence. In fact, well, yeah, I mean, less for some, right? But I mean, so scarcity is definitely a part of it, which is that, I have something you don't kind of mentality, but no, it's the story behind it. Obviously bonus points if it has any kind of inscription on it. I even like it if it has, as long as it's not on the front cover, if it's on the back. I even like it if it has an old address tag on it from somebody, or, a year written. I'm the person who will look up that address and be like, wow, like this is where that record used to live, and somebody used to live in this house and they played it, kind of thing. I think that's cool. Or, you find something with an autograph. Like 95% of the time that I find something with an autograph, I didn't know it until after I received it, especially if it's an online purchase. And the idea that record was then put in front of the musician, probably taken to one of their gigs at a time when they were possibly supporting that record by playing that music. And that is just super cool. It's a way to feel more connected to the original thing, because the whoever it was that commented earlier, we weren't there. We couldn't, we weren't alive then. And this is a way to feel connected to the music and the artists that we love so much.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, if I could, I would, I would have probably went similar route you did in terms of like collecting that stuff. And especially, I'm not someone that has to have a record sound perfect, and I get a lot of people spend a lot of money on this stuff. They're buying every UHQR as it comes out and stuff. And so, a seam split matters or a tick or a pop matters because frankly, I think a lot of it has to do with like resale value. They're so expensive that you want to make sure you're protecting your investment. I if I have an older record, like I'm not expecting it to not have some sound to it. And I grew up in an era where heck, we were lucky if our records didn't skip. You know what I mean? It was like, so
Yeah.
I'm a little more used to that in the music I listen to.
Yeah, I tend to be that way as well, and yet a lot of I'll call it the folks locally in Atlanta that I interact with in the I'll call it vinyl community, but I think I also mean audiophile community because it's usually easier to find people who are interested in music, and then you have to kind of complicate things by then finding somebody who also loves jazz as much as you do.
Right.
But I am surrounded by a lot of people who are all about that pristine, one step or no step or whatever,
Yeah, right.
kind of thing. But to each their own, right? Like it's,
Right.
I don't, I just don't, I don't focus on it quite as much. I think, like, I fully acknowledge that there's lots of folks who it really bothers them, and like, you don't want to listen to something that bothers you. Like, you could call that, being too, I don't know, picky, but like if it bothers you, then it bothers you and you can't control that. And so it's like,
Right.
go pursue what it is that doesn't bother you. And it just means for those of us who doesn't bother as much, we have a little bit easier way of getting at the music that we want because we don't have to spend as much. Right.
Right.
So I'll still listen to, especially the rarer it is, the more relaxed I'm going to be about the condition, obviously. But I still have stuff that's in lesser shape. I hope that I don't still have many things that skip, but I still have stuff in lesser shape. And I don't know. I mean, am I desperately trying to upgrade all of those things? No, but I opportunistically look for upgrades all the time. That's one of the reasons why everything's cataloged in Discogs, because then I'm in a store and I can quickly look up and be like, wait, this is a nice copy. What's my copy look like? And then I look it up and I'm like, G plus, why didn't I ever upgrade? And then it's an easy decision. And that happens all the time. Like, I would say that the majority of my new purchases, when I say new purchases, I mean, in this case, vintage vinyl, the majority of those purchases are for records I already have.
Gotcha.
I'm just trying to upgrade.
Very nice. Yeah, well, I mean, Dave says scratch matters. Yeah, I mean, two things I can't live with. One is a skip, obvious. I mean, you can't skip. And the other is a repeating tick, right? So, and the scratches can cause that. I'm okay with even if it's like, sounds like Rice Krispies, so to speak. It's that water torture thing that gets in your mind when it's just repeatedly going tick, tick, tick. I'm like, okay, I can't live with that. But other than that, like, and again, you're right. It's context matters. If it's something from the 80s, I'm expecting it to sound pretty clean. If it's something like, a 50s record or something like, I have much more leeway.
Yeah. I think that, I think that's right. And I made the mistake actually, even on Sunday, of like not previewing something. And there was just like repeating kind of like whoosh that was going over the radio for 3 whole minutes throughout Manhattan. And I was just like, oh, that was my
fault. No. How's your timing? Can I ask you a couple more? Maybe we get into some of these reissue series, then we can play our fantasy draft. You got time for that?
Yeah. Let's do it. And as you say that, I'm like, where did I wanted to pull out each of those records that I had for that, and they're not right in front of me, but I have, don't worry. We'll solve for that here.
It's all upstairs.
No, yeah. I'm not allowed to take
upstairs, right?
Oh yeah. No, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, sorry, go ahead. I've got time.
Yeah, so we talked, so in terms of, I appreciate your being so candid with the reissue series that come out versus like the originals and stuff, because I think a lot of people want to know. There's so many things on you'll always hear stuff like the Blue Notes were mastered differently back in the day because they were for different, cheaper systems and stuff. And of course, that's going to go one way or the other for you. Either you want to be a traditionalist and it's like, I don't care, like I want it to just sound like it did, or you like some of the improvements they've been able to make over the years. But on kind of a side note is, so the Jazz Bums just did a video and they had Michael Fremer on there and they talked about, and I'm sure you're well aware of the Strata-East catalog now getting reissued.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts or insight into that in terms of, do you have, first of all, that was, I'm enough of a casual where I wasn't really aware of that label. Is that something you were really familiar with and you're excited to see come out?
Yeah, very much so. So Strata-East, I would say, is a label that, people have been passionate about for a long time, but I don't know that that's necessarily translated in high values until maybe the last 5 years and change. I think always there's like a couple of the titles that that commanded the big bucks, but so there's a lot more energy around that label because of the style of music that is very much in the, I mean, you can't paint it with a single, what's the right terminology? It's not a monolithic thing, the genre that is Strata-East. I think a lot of people want it to be spiritual or they want it to be post-bop, but it's more it's broader than that. Strata-East is not a sound. It's just happens to be a collection of artists who were able to play the music. I think that they had more artistic freedom to do so. And so it was a little bit more expansive in feel and more interesting than the very sort of contained stuff. So when I think about the releases that Mac Avenue chose to put out, I thought it was very interesting to see Ezifo Zam, which is the Pharoah Sanders title, being not only the first, but it's their Record Store Day release as well, right? I think that they're putting that out for Record Store Day. And it could be, maybe and I don't, it could be that one is a variant and that they're going to do a broader release. I don't know that they would just want to lock one up in Record Store Day. Does anybody out there maybe in the comments know?
Yeah, maybe in the comments. I don't know that. I kind of assumed that it was just a Record Store Day release, but I don't know if it's
yeah,
a special release.
So this is and mine was signed poorly by a prior owner, but this is the title Ezifo Zam by Pharoah Sanders. And so a couple of things about this. First of all, everybody's going to lean in because it's Pharoah Sanders, but you also have Sonny Fortune, Billy Hart, Howard Johnson, Cecil McBee, Sonny Chirac, Lonnie Liston Smith, Leon Thomas. I mean, there's some fantastic artists here. But the interesting thing is, I don't know if the music is for everybody.
Well, that was going to be my question. Is that the typical Pharoah where we get like a beautiful kind of one-sided kind of vamp that is accessible to people, and then on the flip side we get the free jazz, just craziness, or is this different?
Yeah, so I'll say it's a little bit different, and I don't want to necessarily put words in other people's mouths, but I will say for me, and some people know my kind of tastes and preferences, and I'm not really a free jazz guy. It's just never been something that's resonated with me. But I do I have listened to a lot because I'm always seeking to learn, right? I'm seeking to kind of expand my horizons. So with this one, there are just 3 tracks. The very first track is very much like something you would hear on a Impulse record. It's Leon Thomas's vocals that I call a yodel, but it's not exactly that, but I think you know what I mean.
Right.
And it is Pharoah Sanders' sort of, beautiful, sort of almost throaty kind of sax tone, his overblown sound that he's so associated with. And it's like this kind of vamp. It's like a it's almost like what you'd expect. What is it called when it's like, there's a word that I'm looking for. But it's, it's like religious in feel, it's spiritual in feel, right?
Right.
So that is that. And it's 8 minutes and change. The second one is pretty out there. It's pretty out there and sort of free jazz-y. And it's not as enjoyable for me. It's not exactly my tastes. And the third one is kind of some more of that. It actually starts out a little bit more accessible, but it's heavy percussion. Pharoah, if he picks up his sax, it's in the last 30 seconds. Like it's just percussion and texture and like, I see Tokyo Record Style said transcendent, and that isn't it, but it did remind me the word I was looking for, and that is invocation. So that first one, Prince of Peace, felt like this sort of religious invocation.
Okay.
But the third one, it's it's a lot. Like I listened to it somewhat recently and I was reminded that this is one of the more, for me, challenging Pharoah Sanders records. And so I think it's not interesting that they chose it. If they're gonna start reissuing Strata-East, like you
Start
gotta,
with Pharaoh. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
yeah. But on the other hand, give me a quick second. Some of the other ones, so they had this Music Inc. by Charles Tolliver and crew live at Slugs. This is volume 2. I do not own volume 1, but I do have volume 2. That one is just very different in tone. It's post bop, it's high energy, it's engaging, right? Like Charles Rouse's 2 is 1 is another one that I would love to own an original of, but I don't. One of the best on the whole label. It's very groove heavy, like this sort of like, again, repeating vamping kind of groove stuff. Feels much more produced. It's kind of post bop in places, but it feels unusual to hear Charles Rouse in this kind of format, and it's phenomenal. So like, I mean, here's the thing, like, is Mac Avenue doing the right thing by reissuing the label? Absolutely. I think it's gonna be really interesting though, because I think people, if they don't know as much about the label, what they're going to realize very quickly is that it isn't just one thing. It's many different styles. And I know there's a lot of completists in this hobby, and I'm despite the fact that what our previous conversation with some of these labels, when it comes to new music, I'm very much like, or new reissues, I very much pick and choose, and that will be my style going into to Strata as well, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I was kind of pleasantly surprised to see the Charlie Rouse pick. I don't know a lot about his solos or his stuff as a leader. Obviously, coming out of the Thelonious Monk band, he's featured a lot in the Straight No Chaser movie that they did on Thelonious Monk, and suits his band very well. But I wasn't sure what to expect with this record, so I'm glad to hear that it's a good one, because this is actually probably the one I'm most excited for. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Oh, it's got to be great. Like, there's no way. I mean, Fremer said it's great, and it seems like they're going about it in the right way. I mean, it's probably going to be fantastic.
Very nice. I mean, this is going to be a continuing series, probably, right? I mean, you think that maybe they'll release some for the second half of the 2025 or something? I mean, do you think, based on your knowledge of other labels, I mean, can we kind of expect that they're going to continue this?
Yeah, I hope so. So to Roberto's point in the comments, I don't know if they have the rights to everything. Now, I'd like to think that Charles Tolliver does control to some degree, but that may not be the case. There could be some other complications behind some of the releases in terms of estates, because we've seen that with other labels where, you're not always able to get everything you want. Now, so Pure Pleasure released some of them. I want to say P-Vine out of like Japan put out some of them as well, because I think I have like a Weldon Irvine, his Strata-East record that was recently put out. I want to say in Japan. It could have been the Pure Pleasure release. And so would that be included in this one? I don't know. I mean, it could be. I mean, somehow we can get consecutive releases of A Love Supreme like every year, and no one has a problem with that. And they're in like sometimes different labels, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
Oh wow, look who we have in our presence now.
Blue Note Vinyl Spinners, what's up, baby? Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Yeah, appreciate everybody being here. This is a great conversation. Interesting. Okay. Was there anything else I want to ask you before we get into this fantasy draft? Let me see.
Yeah, I'm up for. Like I said, I've got some more time. We can cover the draft, and I know we were kind of chatting, I think, the other day about like even sort of more general recommendations.
Oh yeah, right.
So I don't know if you wanted to go there, but
yeah, let's do that. I think I asked Chris to pick. Give us 3 records for the noob, someone that's coming in and wants to know, like, what are 3 records I should start with. And then give us 3 for the person that, is just looking for something new and feels like they've already heard everything. Is there, and so I think that'd be a great place to go.
Yeah. And so I know that we have some aficionados, at least in the chat. And so, I'm not necessarily able to tell everybody something new to them, but maybe this will be helpful for someone out there. Right.
Sure.
So my problem always with the typical selections is not that they aren't great selections, it's that they're everybody's selections. In fact, I made a top 5 video on YouTube, continues to be my highest viewed video. And people complained in the comments that I didn't include Kind of Blue and Gets and Gilberto. I'm
Right.
like, it's because it's my top 5. Like what are you talking about? So anyway, the typical ones: Miles Davis, Kind of Blue; Gets Gilberto; Coltrane's Blue Train; Louis Armstrong; Ellen Lewis.
Well, they're already on every single list, right?
They're
Like
on
your
all the
job is
lists.
to pick
Dave
some
Brubeck.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So for me, like if I'm going to advise somebody new to the hobby, or maybe more of a rock person and hasn't experimented as much with jazz, I want to give them something maybe that they wouldn't necessarily find immediately, but maybe that next layer, right?
Yeah.
And so some of the ones that I came up with that just came top of mind because they're ones that I was super passionate about when I started out listening, were Wes Montgomery's Boss Guitar. I think is a phenomenal record. And yes, you do have to hear a little bit of organ in there, but his technique that he uses on that record, and really you could say that about the incredible Wes Montgomery and his trio record and all these things, but Wes Montgomery's Boss Guitar for me is just absolutely phenomenal. And I think it's one of those records that if you are a guitar fan in another genre, there's lots to appreciate when you listen to this because he's a phenomenal guitarist, right?
Right.
So that's one. Freddie Hubbard's Red Clay is really getting a lot of well-deserved praise these days. And it probably does need yet another reissue. I actually do have like a 45 reissue that somebody put out some years ago. That's pretty great. But that's one that I think, because it's a little bit more produced and it is a little bit smoother sound, it's not as harsh. It's also something that is going to at least sound vaguely familiar. It's going to be a more challenging record than Boss Guitar for sure. But with that title track especially, I think it's something that enough folks have covered. It's been sampled before, etc. I think Jack Wilkins' version or something was the one that was sampled. But that's a phenomenal record. Gene Ammon's Boss Guitar is something that made my top 5, and I can't shut up about it. I think that record, and it was reissued by Acoustic Sounds recently. I think that record is just absolutely phenomenal. I think the engineering is fantastic, like one of Rudy Van Gelder's best type of thing. So those would be 3 that like just very quickly came to mind that are not obscure whatsoever, but are not those ones that you're going to find on a typical top 5 list.
Right. I'm going to take a mini victory lap for the Red Clay because I actually had that on my list. I did a show a couple weeks ago where I basically did that. I showed like 10 records that aren't going to be on the typical list, but that I think people should own, and Red Clay is on there. I love that one.
Nice. Yeah. And really, and like, here's the thing, depending on how you, experience music, right? Like when I heard Red Clay, then I had to hear, the rest of the CTI, his the CTI output. And like, I found out that I didn't know that Straight Life was so damn good. I figured it just kind of stopped at Red Clay, and then I heard Straight Life and I'm like, what the hell is this?
And I think Red Clay was his first record on CTI, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe so.
I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting how that'll happen. Yeah, and then you go out and explore the other things on the same label or with the same lineup or similar lineups. Like I have a record right here. I'm not going to say which one it is because it could be one of many, right? With Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, and we'll just keep it with those 2. I won't say anything else because I don't want to give it away. But I mean, so anything with Herbie and Ron Carter, I seek it out because everything I've heard is so good.
Yeah, and those guys would kind of guest around town too. Like you'll find them on a record and you're like, wait, neither one of them are the leader. What are they doing here?
Right. Yep. So what about for the experienced jazz person?
Yeah. So what I try to do here is not blow people away with private press knowledge or anything like that, or stuff that's like that costs too much money. I was still trying to stick with some major labels, but maybe that like at that extra layer. So one of the things that occurred to me is that there's a lot more people who like Bill Evans than who typically buy jazz music. We see that in the Record Store Day lists, the fact that it appears every time and in the highest quantity. So there's a lot of people that are digging Bill Evans outside of the people who are buying just any old jazz.
No pun intended.
Yeah, yeah. So the first thing that came to mind to me in that regard is Don Friedman. So Don Friedman was a Riverside Records pianist. He put out, I think his best work was A Day in the City. However, he also put out Circle Waltz for Riverside, as well as I think it's called like Ballad in C sharp minor. For Prestige, he put out an album called Metamorphosis, and he kind of guessed it around, but he had to me a very different style that I think is not too far of a departure from for those folks who really like Bill Evans and are kind of going down that path of looking for a kind of introspective pianist. So I really like him. The next artist, somebody everybody knows, but I don't know that necessarily everybody's like really sort of double clicked into George Russell. So George Russell was a pioneer of sort of modal jazz with others, but he was certainly one of the pioneers, and he put out coincidentally enough a bunch of stuff for Riverside as well. So as well as other labels. I want to say like RCA Victor maybe, but he put out an album called Aesthetic that was fantastic. He put out like Jazz in the Space Age, which might have been on Decca. Just trying to remember. But I think his work is super interesting, mostly from a compositional standpoint. And again, not everybody's leaned in there. And then I'm actually going to throw Mingus out there. Now I know that Mingus appears on every top 5 list, or is one of those typical albums you see. But the album people don't always get into is Let My Children Hear Music. It was put out in 1972. And I think, and this is partly because I've read Mingus's words about it, I think that it's the pinnacle of his entire career. And I know that it's one of the albums that he was the most happy with out of everything that he put out. I think it's, I think I've said it before on my channel, but I think it's like the closest realization of everything he wanted to achieve in recorded music. And it's, don't get me wrong, it's like, it's crazy in places, but it's one of those that, repeated listens and all that. I think people really get into. So
Mingus is like a great person to recommend to anyone because he has kind of distinct sort of styles in groupings. Like you can take like Mingus, and Mingus in Wonderland and almost hand that to one person. And then, like you said, then you can take the record you just named and maybe Pithecanthropus erectus and the clown and different things and kind of pass that on to a different kind of listener. And that's what's really cool about him is it's hard to not find something by Mingus that you're going to like, no matter what kind of jazz listener you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even, if you like the classic era, don't get me wrong, he was still innovating, but some of his earliest stuff with Max Roach for debut, right? Or like, I mean, you can go listen to him play piano and get a different side of Mingus as well.
Yep. Yeah, very true. Those some great picks. All good stuff. All right, what do you say? You want to get into? Do you want to try to find those records for your fantasy draft? What do you think? Are we just gonna?
Yeah,
I have my stack here.
yeah. That's the. Gosh, I thought I had them. I'll tell you what. If you can cover for me for the next minute or two, and I'll probably turn off video so you don't see me fumbling around. Am I able to? Yeah, I think I can do that, and I'll just be back in a second.
Okay, fair enough. Cool. Yeah, fortunately, I have a little experience going solo, so I do want to thank everybody for being here and everyone making an appearance. Everybody chiming in the chat. It does make these live streams way more fun. I'll just remind everybody, I guess, quickly, is that I am going live every single day now. So if you're not familiar with Spins Vinyl and you came here because you're good friends with WCB, check out some of the other stuff that I have. I do interviews like this, have guests every Tuesday. Felipe from the Jazz Bums was here a couple weeks ago, so you can catch that on the channel. And so that's my Tuesday show. Monday, I do a show with my guy Chris, and we do a show called Your Brain on Vinyl, which is really cool. And that's going to be just, it's going to be a broader conversation around lots of different kinds of music and stuff. Wednesdays, I do a show called Turntable Tales, and that's with my guy, the Hall of Famer, Mr. Hall of Fame, Mr. Old School in the vinyl community. And that's where I get to, like, both of us get to just be kids, and we just talk a lot about kind of our history with music, and we get into the nostalgia and our feels and stuff like that. So that's tomorrow, and tomorrow's going to be a fun one. Thursday is Surface Noise. So I trade off Thursdays with Chance over at the Concert Buddy channel. And so this Thursday is the B-side. So I will be hosting that. And then Fridays, the whole kind of plan on Fridays was to maybe do an hour of jazz and then take you into the jazz bums. So if you're someone that likes watching the jazz bums every week, drop in here an hour before. We do an hour on Fridays right before the jazz bums. And then through the magic of YouTube, I will take you right into the jazz bums live stream. So you don't have to lift a finger. You don't have to worry you're going to forget to go, anything like that. I just take you right in there. So that's really cool. Let me see if there's any questions. I love Horace Silver. I love the ones you guys are picking. You know, Song for My Father. Final like Kick saying, nah, it's got to be Cape Verdean blues. Yeah, all great stuff. And WC is back.
Yeah,
I hope I didn't put too much pressure on you, but thanks for doing that.
No, it's you know what it is. It's just I wasn't successful, but I was successful because I was able to grab like some records that are still representative of the exact same artists that I wanted to highlight. So
Perfect.
I'm ready to do it.
Let's do it.
I'm too unorganized. Again, when you organize by label, what are you supposed to do?
I know that's tough. Well, next time we'll have to pick one label and just stick with that. Like we'll just do impulse artists. That might be kind of fun.
There you go.
Part of the fun is like restricting it, and we got to get to that point too. All right. Well, now that we have this all set up, I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. Should we both pick an instrument? By the way, we didn't even talk about like what size group are we going to do? Like, so I don't know how many guys you picked or anything like that.
Well, so because we didn't set this up, I ended up finding a vibes player and a guitarist and a trumpet player and a saxophonist. And then I, of course, have the rhythm section. So I can go any way you want. If you want to just stick with quartet, that can keep things a little bit more focused. But you know, I'll
that's cool. I picked a quintet. So if you want to go 5, we can do that.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Cool. Why don't we go let's try this. Let's go by instrument. Maybe we do that. And then at the end, we can kind of make an argument. We'll put together our whole lineup, and that way people kind of get a. Yeah. I'm just trying to get the best way to follow this. So, so guys, this is going to be. We've done a fantasy draft before on here. In fact, Chris was part of it along with Felipe, and then Chris, the group seeker, was here. I thought that was super fun, and I had the software set up, and we got to select our guys and make an argument, and people voted and stuff like that. So maybe we'll do a poll here too at the end of this, and you guys can decide who has the better group, just for fun. But one thing I thought might be fun is like, let's have a similar kind of deal, but let's just show we can pick the records, and that way there's some visual aid, and we'll just do one of these. Let's do the quintet. I'll start with my drummer if that's cool. So I picked a guy who, and again, I sort of jokingly, when I'm looking at compositions of players on a record, I sort of have fun with how close does it come to the lineup on Out to Lunch? And this is one of those records. We got Bobby Hutcherson, we got Richard Davis on here. This is Lifetime. This was a recent Tone Poet reissue. And so I'm picking Anthony Williams because this is for my drums. And Anthony Williams is a guy who, again, I discovered off of Out to Lunch. And he comes in here clutch. I think that for the kind of band I'm going to be building here, for the group that I'm putting together for this fantasy draft, Tony Williams is going to be the perfect complement on the drums, because he's a guy to me that is super versatile, super original. He's the perfect complement to an Out to Lunch, because everyone on Out to Lunch, Freddie Hubbard, Richard Davis, Hutcherson, all those guys are just so capable and can like hang in there with what Eric Dolphy is doing. So that's I'll keep it short, but that's why I'm picking Anthony Williams as my drummer for this fantasy band.
Solid choice. That Tone Poet edition happens to be, in my opinion, one of the best sounding Tone Poets that they have put out as well. I was
nice.
Really impressed with that one. All right, so going with drummer as well. I've got Roy Brooks here, The Free Slave, and this was put out originally on Muse, and wanted it to be a promo, but it's not. But you've got, so listen to the lineup on this. You've got Woody Shaw, George Coleman, Hugh Lawson, and Cecil McBee. And this is just, you know, it's that expansive post bop thing that everybody loves. But Roy Brooks was not, you know, recorded often as a leader. You know, he put this out. He put Beat out, which was a record probably more people know because it was recently reissued. Not a great version by Third Man Records. But I also recently acquired the Smart Set, which is his album for Bay State, which is a fantastic album. But I love Roy Brooks, right? He's frequently represented in lineups, just not as much as a leader. But when he had an album as a leader, he just, you know, just blew me away.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Great first pick. So I'm going to just start with my rhythm section. So I'm going to go to bass players, and we already mentioned them. This is going to, and if I'm being honest, my pick, and there's a lot of different strategies you can go with this, right? You can go with who's got the chemistry. You can go with a super band. If I'm being honest, this is kind of my super band. And so my bass player is going to be Mingus. Just another guy that will not take backseat to anyone. Comes in strong. Another guy that worked with Eric Dolphy, and I think Dolphy, a lot of his great, even maybe more accessible stuff for people, with guys like Jackie Bard on piano and Mingus and Dolphy, just and a lot of that footage you can find on YouTube. Those are great little videos and little sessions, I think. And so for a lot of reasons, I'm taking Mingus. I just think he's a powerhouse. I think he's a great composer. So if I need, he's one of the best composers, as a matter of fact, in jazz, in my humble opinion. So if I need somebody to write some tunes in a pinch, I can count on Mingus. So that's my bass player to go along with Tony Williams.
Nice. Well, no repetition yet. So I've got Richard Davis.
Oh,
now, you know, Richard Davis was not infrequently recorded. I know it's, I think that Ron Carter literally has the Guinness Book of World Records for the most appearances as a bassist, but Richard Davis can't be too far behind. And in fact, Richard Davis was on the scene before Ron Carter was. He was backing up Don Shirley in the mid 50s, I want to say, at the beginning of his career. Yeah, Don Shirley, he played with like Sarah Vaughan. The reason why I'm, you know, pulling this forward right now, and this happens to be the album Epistrophe and Now's the Time for Muse, is because of this era for him, right? Like Richard Davis for me was at his, you know, at his peak in the early 70s, and putting out phenomenal music for Muse. And this is what I was looking for on the Free Slave, right? Is the
there we go.
promo. But this isn't the album I was going to show, but I had to improvise and grab another here. But yeah, it's for the same reasons that I chose Roy Brooks, right? I feel like it's very compatible, you know, bassist and drummer pairing. They're playing a similar style of music. They can do that kind of that lovely post bop thing that we all love so much these days.
Richard Davis is incredible. And again, I go back to Out to Lunch, but I mean, here's a guy that just, along with Tony Williams, that just is so creative with the instrument, right? Super innovative, has his own voice. You can't really compare him to anyone. That is a great pick. Okay. I'm going to go piano. And again, I said I was going to do a super band. My piano guy is going to be Jazz himself. We wouldn't have jazz in the same way that we have it today, in my humble opinion, if we did not have a Monk. This is Thelonious Monk here with John Coltrane. I think this is a fantastic album. This is a cool, one of my few kind of Obi strip kind of jazz albums right there. So this is kind of fun, originally on Riverside. But man, Monk just oozes jazz to me because he's that guy that, you know, quirky, every note's got to be, you can't mistake him when you hear him. He was disregarded for a long time because he was so far ahead of his time, and then jazz caught up. And just an incredible piano player. I would, you know, not a virtuoso, but that we're talking about jazz here. Like, he's someone that just has his own style. He's going to come in and he's going to improvise in the moment and just come up with some of the most interesting stuff that you didn't know you loved until you hear it. And so Monk is going to be sitting in with Mingus and Anthony Williams.
All right. So yeah, you have quite the super group that you're building there.
Trying to appeal to the people that are looking for a super group.
Yeah. Well, all good and still no repetition. So what I pulled was Jack Wilson, Easterly Winds. And don't worry, while this is a tone poet, I also have the original because
of course he does.
Yeah. So Jack Wilson, obviously people know him for Blue Note, right? So he put out, was it 3 or 4? Put out Song for My Daughter, something. Let's see, Song for My Daughter, Easterly Winds. Was it Something Else? Isn't that not Something Else, but like Something Else? I think was one of them.
How many jazz records are titled some variation of something else?
Yeah, and I'm trying. No? It's Something Personal. That's what it is. That's what it is. But you're right. There are many that are titled something else, but Something Personal, and actually Something Personal is the one that I again have somewhere in here, probably buried under records, that I wanted to show, because Something Personal is actually my favorite of the ones that he did for Blue Note, even though Lee Morgan's not on that one. But I really like Jack Wilson's ability to play in a very sort of introspective way. I feel like he was capable of doing some of the music that these other artists that I chose did, although I haven't necessarily seen evidence of that. It just felt to me like there was some sort of, I don't know, like there's a hypnotic nature to his music that I think is most present on Something Personal, as well as the Vault record called Rambling, which is just absolutely phenomenal. If people haven't seen or heard Rambling, it was recently reissued. I think it was a digital thing and it wasn't that well done, but it's still better than nothing. Rambling is a fantastic album. He plays the title track as an Ornette Coleman song. But he plays in a very introspective way, and I feel like it could be applied to this kind of like this post-pop thing, even though that wasn't like his day in and day out style. But he's just, I've always really enjoyed Jack Wilson's playing.
Nice. Very nice. Okay. Well, I feel like I'm picking a bunch of superstars here. And here was my thinking going into this. Now, I could have said, and I think I've done this in the past, where it's like, okay, let me see how out there I can be with my picks. For some reason, when we talked about this, I really thought about what is a group I'd really want to see be together. And I don't care how common or how big these names are, but now I'm kind of embarrassed because I picked a lot of, guys that everyone's going to know. And so this is a quintet. So I got 2 more guys. We've got the rhythm section sorted out, but I'm going to have vibes too. And when you're talking vibes, there's really only one name when you're talking vibes. And then I say that with tongue in cheek because he's my guy, but obviously it's gonna be Bobby Hutcherson. This is a great one. This is San Francisco with Harold Land. It's a great album, but again, and the other thing I went heavy on, I can see now, is composers, and that's because I really value composing in jazz. I know in the hard bop era, there's a lot of guys that get a ton of love in the Blue Note and stuff like that. It's a lot of soloing. It's a lot of, there's just, I really value composers, people that come up with their own tunes in their own unique way. And Thelonious Monk was a fantastic composer. Mingus is an incredible composer. I feel the same way about Hutcherson. I think if you listen to these records, always going to be at least one really sensitive tune. This has that. It's just a very kind of introspective, slow. It's very simple too. It was very impressive how much Hutcherson can do with so little, and that's like the hallmark of a genius, in my opinion. So I gotta have him on vibes. So Bobby Hutcherson, I love this one and more. He's probably one of the people who I really make an attempt to pick up everything by him. I have probably his first, 15, most of his Blue Notes and stuff, so which he mostly recorded on Blue Note. So there you go. Bobby Hutcherson on vibes.
All right. So I'm deviating from the instrument, but just because with this quintet, I'm gonna go vibesless, especially since Bobby's locked up. So
Well,
I'm
you
going
can pick. I mean, I'm sorry. I feel like now I threw you off because I picked Bobby. I'm sorry.
fine, Lionel Hampton. No, I'm kidding. So so nothing against Lionel. So I'm going sax here, and I'm actually going to go Benny Maupin. This happens to be Slow Traffic to the Right, which is a fantastic album. It's a popular DJ choice. But funnily enough, I got into this one relatively recently. I was late to the game, whereas I knew Benny Maupin both from his work as a supporting artist as well as on Jewel and the Lotus, which is that really, really stellar ECM record. And again, like if there's something consistent, I think again about these artists, it's their ability to like play in this kind of hypnotic way that draws the listener in this kind of like post bop vamping type of thing. And Benny Maupin to me has that capability. I don't know necessarily. Well, here's the thing: I'm sure that he's played with Richard Davis because everybody's played with Richard Davis. But this otherwise is not a group so far that existed in each other's presence. I don't think terribly often, which I think is probably part of the fun here. So yeah, so I'm going with Benny Maupin. I think that I think he needed more albums as a leader, but what we have is fantastic.
I love that one. I love the cover. What year that came out roughly? Is that a 70s record or
70s, maybe 77? Is it gonna say? No, of course.
I'm literally just going off the cover photo. That's really cool.
It was 77. How about that?
Wow, look at that. Very nice.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, definitely has that look.
Yeah. That's
also
cool.
Like don't be riding your bike in the middle of the street,
What do people think about that? Like it's a very much a departure from like a early 60s Blue Note or something, right? So
yeah.
All right. I feel like I'm embarrassing myself more and more as we go, but as I said, like this is the group I want to hear. Maybe one day when AI has been perfected, which is going to be a scary day, but I'll use it for putting together super groups or fantasy drafts of groups and stuff like that, and just to see what they would actually sound like. So I got to have a horn player. I'm getting a multi-instrumentalist, very diverse person, avant-garde. And you guys know what I'm going to say. Of course, I got to pick my guy right there, Eric Dolphy. I know Eric Dolphy and Bobby played together a few times, famously on Out to Lunch. But, this is more about mixing them in with like Mingus and Monk and stuff like that. But Dolphy, I mean, need I say more? I love Eric. Beautiful person, beautiful human being, stolen from us way too early. Everybody looked up to him as just being a leader in the avant-garde realm, and of course he's breaking out the bass clarinet on this, and flute even maybe. We'll keep him busy going from instrument to instrument to instrument. But yeah, I got to pick. When I'm picking a horn person, it's just impossible for me to, especially with the kind of band I'm piecing together. It's got to be Dolphy. So there you go.
All right. Well, I guess this is that's your final pick, right?
That's my final one. Yep.
All right, that's strong. And now that I think about it, because Dolphy was in the Mingus's Jazz Workshop, they've got some connectivity.
I know. I said that earlier. You're right. Yep.
They know how to play together.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
All right. So this
isn't even a fantasy draft, guys. I'm just putting together.
Yeah. All right.
So this is my favorite group. That's all.
Yeah, well, hey, that you can't. What are you gonna do? Pick lesser artists, like
exactly.
Well, we did this with no conflict. Now, I will say that because I was frantically grabbing stuff, I'm so embarrassed that I picked out the records and they're leaning somewhere, maybe in the other room. What I was able to do was not pick an album by this artist that I'm choosing, but the artist is on the album cover. So It's going to work anyway. Plus, it's an opportunity for me to share with you all a rare original prestige record, which, it's kind of pulling my channel vibe into your channel. So who I went with is Donald Byrd. And though he is not the leader on the George Wallington record, what you will see is that he is, I don't know, where is it? I can't tell. Can you see him? There he is. You see him? So that's Donald Byrd hanging off the back of
on the back, yep,
carriage. in Central Park, presumably. So Donald Byrd, not for this era, although I like Donald Byrd in this era. But if you're thinking about the vibe that I have going with the rest of these artists, I need electric Byrd, black Byrd. I need that era, that funk kind of era of Donald Byrd.
Yes.
Some production value, that kind of thing.
Street Lady.
Yeah. I think that kind of funk vibe is exactly what I want to overlay onto each of these artists. I mean, picture him like playing alongside Benny Maupin, and like this is the part, remember, Jason, where I'm selling myself right before people vote.
Yes.
You know? So
I don't think you have to work that hard. I think people are going to be like, "Oh, the guy just picked the Eric Dolphy band. What are we doing?"
Yeah. But yeah, so to recap, right? So we've got Roy Brooks, we've got Richard Davis, got Jack Wilson, Benny Maupin, and Donald Byrd.
Ooh.
That is a quintet that I will pay good money to see, preferably at Slugs. And yeah, that's my pick.
Very nice. What I have is 60% out to lunch, guys. And then Mingus, who played frequently with Eric Dolphy. And then Monk. So, I'd like to see, we'll get Monk on the piano there. You're right. We got to get Monk and, who said it? Mungus. We got to get Monk and Mingus to play nice, right? Or no, Tony and Monk to play nice, said Roberto Carlos. Absolutely. So there's a little bit of variation there. Again, my bias to out to lunch, right, is really showing here. But yeah, we got Eric Dolphy, we got Bobby Hutcherson, we got Mingus, we got Tony Williams, and we got Monk. So that's my fantasy band right there. Let me see if I can put together a little. I'm not prepared for this, but let me see if I can put together a little.
I can fill the vacant space.
There we go.
Oh, you got it?
No, go for it. I'm just going to type it in, create the what do you call it? Create the poll. But yeah, feel free to jump in while I'm doing this.
Yeah. Well, so I guess here's a topic. How about this? All of us who chose to do quarterly Tone Poet subscriptions have to choose whether we're going to continue. What's the next exclusive title?
Well, that's a good topic. Can I ask you? Can I put you on the spot again at risk of having you alienate even more people?
Yeah.
What has been your experience with receiving these? Do you want to talk about that? There's a lot of controversy in the community around people just getting, for some reason, it seems like whether it's the QC is like struggling right now. Has that been your experience? And feel free to say, I don't want to talk about it. You've plead the fifth, but I'm just curious.
I don't want to say people are making it up, but I've never had that problem with Tone Poet. I've had it once with the Blue Note Classic series, but I've never had a problem with Tone Poet. I've never sent. Oh, how about this? This is controversial. I had to send my Blue Note review box set back to Blue Notes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that expensive.
Why?
Because one of the copy of Sonic Boom had a scratch on it, and I was like, if I'm spending
scratch.
How? Yeah, it was a scratch. Yeah, I was like, it should not have passed. Like, if anybody looked at it, they would have pulled it. Wow. So anyway, other than that, I've never sent something back to Blue Note. So I haven't had any problems. Haven't any problems with the subscriptions or the Tone Poet Society series or anything like that. I know that what they just put out. Well, they put out two announcements. One is not the exclusive title, but one of these special edition 3-disc sets that they put out is the the Kenny Burrell. What is the On View, I think is what it's called. So they're putting out a 3-disc of that. But then the other announcement that people should be excited about is that they have a solution for select countries in the ex-US community. So apparently they're going to be going through a few announcements. First is like the initial batch of countries they've opened it up to, and then later in the year they're going to say, here's the other places that we can send it to. I think that their intention is to try to do them all. And I'm not trying to be the Blue Note spokesperson. It's just that when I posted a video about the society, there was just a full 50% of my audience on YouTube is outside of the US. So there's a lot of people that had something to say about it, rightly so, for being excluded. And anyway, it sounds like very soon they're gonna have a solution. But I also I sympathize. I'm in the shipping industry. We don't know what the tariffs are going to be. We don't know what that is going to be. Like, you can't predict what shipping costs are going to be. And it's like, they're collecting money up front. They might take a bath on the whole thing. They may not make any money on the whole series if they're paying all this extra money because they forecasted some of these costs wrong. So I sympathize with the struggle, and it sounds like they're putting together a solution. So that's good.
Yeah, it seems like they're taking it seriously and they're not shying away from it. Like, seems like they're approaching it head on, and yeah, so hopefully we can get some improvement there. I'm going to answer a question by grabbing a few records. I'm just going to turn my back for a second. Somebody asked about my favorite monks.
That's a tough one.
Why talk about it when you can show it? It is a tough one. And you asked me, like any of us, ask me tomorrow, I'll give you a different list. But I did just talk about a few of these. I'll do this quickly, but the first one is with Sonny Rollins, and it's this Monk. And Monk and Sonny appear on a couple different records. The other one is great because it has Friday the 13th on it. I love that tune. This just happens to be the first Monk record I ever bought. I got, when the OJC series first was coming out in the 80s, they issued this, and I was there for it. And I got this at the recommendation of my dad, saying, like, go pick up a Thelonious Monk, as I was probing him for questions about jazz and who should I buy and what should I listen to. Has a special place in my heart. I think this is a great album. So Monk and Sonny right here. This is Prestige 7053. And I even pick it over the other one they did, which that's kind of controversial. Maybe people like the other Monk and Sonny better. This one because it came first in my life. And then I love Live Monk. And so 3 really great albums that you can get that I think are all 5-star records are going to be Big Band and Quartet with Monk in concert right there. At Town Hall. Again, this was an OJC. These are, and a lot of stuff is affordable to pick up. The great thing about Monk is, unlike a lot of other people, artists, this stuff's pretty affordable. And then the third one, this is the third live trifecta for me, and it's at the Blackhawk. And I just think these are 3 phenomenal records, each a little bit different. I like his studio stuff too, but he's such a great composer, but his problem is, I think, is that if you own a lot of Monk and you tried to listen to all of them, you're going to hear a lot of repetition. I can only hear some of that stuff so many times. So hearing it in a live setting where it's a little bit different, the band configuration is a little bit different, is just really special. So yeah, I would pick up one of those 3. And again, this was the first one. So it's so good. So yeah, those would be my Monk picks. Hard for me to pick one. And I know I'm kind of steering away from mostly the studio stuff, but I just love Live Monk, man. It's so good.
Yeah, that Blackhawk, especially for me anyway, I really like that session. It's nice.
Do you have a favorite Monk, Chris?
Yeah, I'm a Brilliant Corners kind of guy. Monk's music, Brilliant Corners. I really like those. So, I think I do hear what you're saying. I think maybe some of the earlier versions of these songs, because a lot of them would kind of evolve over time and over the albums in a similar way that Mingus's music would, where he'd take the same composition and kind of change it over a period of time. Monk stuck to his repertoire a lot, but I feel like some of those earlier versions are the ones that appeal to me a little bit more.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Yeah, his stuff is so great, but it runs the risk of being a little bit oversaturated because some of those songs appear fairly frequently. So, and to your point, yeah, sometimes you get a different kind of version of it, but sometimes I struggle with that. As much as I love Monk, I feel like I don't want to get sick of it. So I like throwing on those live records. Let's see, any other questions? Thanks, Vinyl and Kicks. Yeah, those are great. Just got the new Curtis Amy TP, and there is some overload distortion on track A2. Wow, yeah, it seems to be a common theme. And this is not, by the way, I love Tone Poet. I love their product. I love the Classic series. I think it's a massive value. The Classic series sounds so good. I've done shootouts on my channel before. I did Out to Lunch. I picked an early press. I don't have an OG, but I do have the second version of that. I picked a Japanese press. The Music Matters, which is the one that I'm showing here, the double 45 RPM, and the Classic series. And the classic is respectable, man. It stands up to those other ones. Different, you know, they're going to emphasize different things in the music, but man, classic series is such a value.
Yeah, here's that Curtis Amy one that Gonolith is referring to, and
Yeah.
you'll note mine. I have not pulled off the thing yet, so so I'll be on the lookout. I'll certainly be listening for it.
Yeah, and you had no problems, like you said, so it's interesting. Yeah, I'm mostly going off, you know, following the forums on like Facebook and stuff, and of course that's gonna like really kind of aggregate all of the complaints. But nonetheless, it was something I never really would see. I've never had a problem either. And so, but it just seemed like this year was kind of a year that people were really calling stuff out.
Could be. Well, Jason, keep an eye out for this one. It's got Bobby Hutcherson on it.
Yes. I know. I'm sure I talked about that one during we did the, you know, the 2025 Tone Poet, you know, releases and stuff. Chris and I did. Yeah. Anything Bobby. I get excited. They're doing another Bobby Hutcherson. I can't think of the title right now that I don't have that I'm looking forward to. I think coming toward the end of the year. I forget. But you know what? Tone Poet has shown Bobby Hutcherson some true love, and it's good to see it. So
yep,
making his stuff very accessible to people. So well, what do you think? I think that was fun. That was fun, man.
Yeah, I thought so. It's nice to hang out for a little bit on a Tuesday night. Feels like a Friday already.
I know, right? Oh man, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for making the time. Thanks for coming on and doing this. And we're gonna have to do it again, man, because I just think I don't get to talk jazz, you know, especially you're so knowledgeable and it's so fun. I learn a lot from you, and it's just fun to be able to have the dialogue and stuff. So we'll have to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely up for it.
All right, guys. I'm looking for any last second questions before we sign off tonight. Thanks everybody for being here. Shout out Vinyl and Kicks, Roberto, Gonolith here. Let's see. Gonolith says, I suppose all these old recordings will not all be perfect. It's Hutcherson vibes that are hot when he comes in for solo. Yeah. Hutcherson, man, he fits in with so many groups, but also, as I said, he's just a great leader and composer. Montera, thank you, Blue Note Vinyl. That's the one that's coming out. Montera, yeah, and that's a good one too, man. I can't wait. Wait, you have that you have? I imagine you have an OG of that, Chris Montera.
Well, of course.
I'm not going to ask you to try to recall every bit of music you have in your collection, but do you have any thoughts on Montera? Do you recollect that one?
Oh yeah, it's a fantastic album. It's and you know, I know you're saying, you know, you made an effort to buy as many as you can. There's some that I don't care to buy that are a little bit later in his career. I got to be honest. But Montera is definitely one of the keepers. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, thanks Blue Note Vinyl. Thanks Vinyl and Kicks. Thanks Wyoming Dave for being here. Music in the house. Appreciate all you guys. Don't be strangers. Again, tomorrow I'll be here with Brandon for Turntable Tales. That's going to be a fun one too. Chris, again, I can't say it enough. I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you guys.